All right. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if you can all hear me. Hopefully, you can. My name is Nick Bugales. I am Director of Engineering over at Triple X. I've been involved with XRP Ledger now for almost a decade. It's hard to believe that it's been almost a decade. Um, Time flies when you're having fun. So, welcome to this call. The first of hopefully many. It's a privilege to be able to open the call and introduce the moderators or the people coordinate the discussion for this call. And I just want to say right off the bat, this call is being recorded, just so everyone knows. It's going to be an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about a number of things. I'll let Daniel and Yoke, the other two moderators, talk a little bit about the agenda. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions. And very much looking forward to this. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the moderators for today. Yoke, a generative artist that's been doing stuff on with computers and Daniel from Casino Coin. So welcome and excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Nick. Quite excited about this finally happening and about the lineup we're having for today. Yoke, you want to say something, or should I just jump into our agenda?
Yeah, let's get right into it. Thanks for the introduction, Nick.
Great. So the overall idea of these calls, which is supposed to be happening on a regular basis, is that we want to drive the community engagement further. A couple of people are not too happy or feel not too happy about the general communication between Ripple development and the community and the community developers. So we hope we can utilize these calls to get this to a better stage, to make people happy, to get more feedback, to drive discussions a bit more in a clear direction. The idea is also to provide more visibility and transparency for developers and partners that are building on the XRPL, because not everything is always clear all the time, especially when it comes to long-awaited upgrades to the ledger or development timelines, which is not as easy as most people think, but we all know that we're waiting on a couple of things and we're dying for timelines. It's probably one of the most common questions when certain things are getting released. We also want to focus on getting a more diverse community, so it doesn't look like it's just a bunch of guys sitting in their rooms coding stuff. A few guys might remember a couple of weeks ago I did a tweet about looking for female devs that starting a business on the ledger or are developing. Feedback was not as good as I was hoping, so I connected with a couple of women in the space, but it's still a very male-driven environment. And we're also trying to measure the interest of developers and the community about certain features that are coming along in the future. So that's the goals for this call and all calls moving forward.
If I could buttress on that, I think one of the primary reasons this is exciting for me is that we're going to have everybody help each other and not necessarily slipping into developers' DMs, and make it more approachable for people who do find interesting things. And one of the biggest features which we're alluding to is the NFTs on the ledger, which I think has rejuvenated a lot of people's excitement, and we'll get into some of the reasons why I think it's exciting.
Yeah, I think that's the number one feature everyone's waiting for, right? People literally dying for that. I get a couple of DMs if I know anything about the start dates, but I just know as much as most people. we are currently in the voting process. We have 4 validators. Last time I checked voting for the amendment. 3 of them are Ripple. 1 is Ripple. And then, so yeah, I think most people here today for the NFT stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, so what are we going to do next? I think we could maybe step right into XLS 20 and hand it off to Nick if you want to start talking about it. And
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. So, again, awesome to have the microphone back so soon. I think that everybody on the call is aware that the 191 release recently went out, and with it came a ton of really cool things, right? Performance improvements and other things that I think were largely overshadowed by kind of the XLS 20, the vote on XLS 20 beginning. So NFTs are a really interesting category of tokens, assets, and there's a lot of excitement about what can be built with it. I think we're very much at an embryonic stage, right? But there's a lot of really interesting use cases. Just the other day, just yesterday actually, I read about hotels seeking to make your stays, mint stays at hotels as NFTs, so that you could potentially even transfer your booking to somebody else by transferring the NFT. So there's all sorts of interesting things in this space. I'm one of the primary authors of the XLS 20 specification, along with David Schwartz and Anshel Malhotra from Ripple, my 2 co-authors. And I have to say, I think that the spec is pretty cool. We set out to build something that was very space efficient, right? Because NFTs, obviously, people might want to hold a lot of NFTs. People might want to mint a lot of NFTs. So we sought to build out something that's very efficient and very flexible. We didn't want to have something that was, that constrained you as developers. We wanted to make it as flexible as possible. And I think we succeeded with that. So the interesting things with NFTs, right? In other platforms, NFTs require smart contracts. And smart contracts are difficult to write and difficult to secure properly and everything. And the XRP Ledger's approach is to use smart transactors. And so we opted to have this sort of ability to parameterize some of the things that people want most often with NFTs, the ability to transfer and specify royalties and trade them on the DEX, right? We opted to build this functionality directly at the core of the ledger with transactors. And so XLS 20 certainly has a lot of these features and allows for external interactions, right? You can attach metadata associated to an NFT that's external to the ledger, right? And you can do all sorts of very interesting things with that. Generative art, right? NFTs that can only be viewed by the owner, right? Encrypted metadata and so forth. So, very much looking forward to see what people build with this functionality once it's available on the network. Which kind of brings me to the next part of my conversation, right? A lot of people ask, when is this going to be available? And the answer is, I can't tell you. The process by which a feature is introduced to the XRP Ledger relies on a vote by the participants in the ecosystem, more specifically validators. And they have to choose to vote in support of a feature and sustain that support for a period of time, 2 weeks, before the amendment associated with the feature can be activated. So the voting is open, and some people are voting. Ripple's validators are voting in support of XLS 20. I believe at least one other validator is voting in support of it as of a couple of days ago when I looked. More may have also joined. So the process has begun. I think that what we'll see is a period of time where more and more people kind of coalesce around the yes vote, and we'll have to see how that vote plays out. But I don't know. I can't give anyone any specific dates on when this will be activated, like 10 days from now, or 20 days from now, or a month from now. But I do think that, especially for developers, right? All of us on this call, hopefully, are developers, or many of us are developers. I think it's important to point out that you can test the full XLS20 functionality today on a Ripple-sponsored DevNet for NFTs. You can find more information about that on xrpl.org, and also on the RippleX blog post that was posted the other day about announcing Ripple's intention to vote in support of XLS20. So what's next, I guess, for XLS20 is really kind of the people beginning to develop and people beginning to build tooling and infrastructure around NFTs, and then trying to bring these ideas, to crystallize those ideas into an actual shape, an actual thing, right? And start exploring use cases, while at the same time the network is voting in support of this. I think the other thing to consider is that a couple of people asked questions about performance, right? Like, are we concerned about the increased transaction volume? Are we concerned about the load that NFTs bring to the network? Certainly, I think that as responsible server operators, Ripple is definitely concerned about these things, right? The network needs, the network is a very large and amorphous thing, and not, I don't think that we can easily say, we can't understand like every server out there, right? And so it's hard to be able to say that every server will be able to deal with the increased load, but I think that at least the core of the network, right, these large servers provided by the XRP Ledger Foundation and other participants in the ecosystem, Alloy Networks, Ripple, others, should be able to handle the increased transaction load, provided that it's reasonable, right? I think that based on our internal testing, and there's going to be more discussed about this in an upcoming blog post by Ripple, specifically Mark Travis, our lead performance engineer. We're going to be kind of discussing the tests that we ran through to try and understand the performance characteristics on a network that resembles the live net as closely as possible. And I think I would expect maybe an increase in transaction volume by 20 to 30 transactions per second, and I think that the network is able to handle that. But at the same time, I think it's a good time for people, server operators especially, to take a step back and evaluate, right, the implications for the network. Anytime you activate a feature in a blockchain, you're basically carrying it for life, and it brings a load that everyone has to share. And it's a legitimate question to be asking, do we really need this? Do we want to activate this feature? Do we want to support this forever? I don't think there is a definitive yes or no answer. People will have their own analysis and determine what's important to them and base a decision based on that. And hopefully that results in the network coalescing into a decision. So, but at the same time, I think it's important for all of us to start testing, more broadly, right, than just Ripple's internal tests. So I would urge, especially developers who are working on building use cases for NFTs, spin up a server, connect it to the DevNet, right? Put some load on there, push 20, 30, 40 transactions, minting transactions per second, mint, burn, trade. Allow everyone to see the sort of implications and the sort of performance characteristics that this implementation has, and we will all collectively be better for it. And the XRP ledger ultimately will be more robust for us having done these experiments and understanding these the behaviors of the system. So I think that's kind of a good stopping point for me, maybe, to see if anybody has any questions or anything else that they would like to discuss about XLS20 or NFTs.
Yeah, that was a great overview, Nick. And one of the things that really drew me to this standard is, I think you eloquently put, the token ID naturally has, or the issuer naturally arises from the token ID. And for me, as a person who's been dealing with digital art for a while, I've been playing with URLs pointing to things, and the idea of artist sovereignty and like being able to control the royalties over their own creations. And what the blockchain provides is like a secure place for ideas in a way, where intellectual property, in my own belief, intellectual property is sort of like a defense against being real life is being insecure. And when you can point to a blockchain that's a time series database and say like you minted it, I have this thing that is a checksum of that file that proves that I had it, and it's like sending a painting to yourself or a illustration to yourself through the mail. So I really like how you put it, and you're stressing again like how every network participant would be storing this stuff potentially forever, and why you've brought this like minimum wrapper. I think the MVP of MDT in the sense that like you literally have the minimum amount of code required to put on top of a network daemon that's like self-clustering and self-communicate. It's like very cool. So I think we can open it up to questions on this. I do want to talk about, because of my bad, this is the first time we're doing this, I skipped over why me and Daniel are here and why we are like in this spot and you're not, and potentially, but you can be in the future. So maybe we could just like dive into it's not to like shift gears too fast. So like, let's go to questions and then maybe go back to that.
So someone asked, and I'll read out the question first. With XLS20 foreseeable in the future, what are some things that we could do to be proactive about ledger health? With all the tokens and 14D swaps planned, we could be doing 1 million, pieces of art to mint on XLS20. And so he's asking, what do we recommend? Is it correct to assume that we shouldn't all hammer through a mint and swap on the first day of XLS20 de-enabled? So I think that, as I said, that boils down to us trying to understand the performance characteristics of this thing, and despite our best efforts, right? I think the reality of a real live network is very different than anything that you can simulate on a kind of a bench, right? So I think that there's certainly things that we can do, all of us, to be proactive about ledger health, right? If you're operating a server, right? Make sure that your server, look and see, how's it doing on things like memory? How's it doing on things like I/O? Can it, is it maybe time to upgrade, right? How are you doing on bandwidth? Is it time to upgrade on bandwidth? What's your latency, your connectivity latency, right? These are all important characteristics to look at in a server, right? And making sure that your server is up to date, software and everything. Like generally, good administrative practices is an important thing. So I think that's step one. Step two is for people who do operate servers to understand what their servers are doing and to figure out what the bottlenecks are. Could you be moving from RocksDB to NewDB, right? These are, there's significant performance benefits to NewDB if your disk has the bandwidth, right? If your disk is fast enough. So that's certainly something. I think also that projects, right, that are looking to mint and become minters of NFTs and issue NFTs and so forth, should seriously consider running their own infrastructure, right, and contributing both to the network, right, as a whole, but also, providing a good experience, for their own users, right. being able to execute transactions, right, on a server without having to rely on somebody else's server to submit those transactions or to examine the state of the network. So certainly, another thing from that perspective would be for projects to look into supporting the ledger. Now, I get that maybe not everybody has the expertise to run servers, and maybe not everybody has the sort of background that you need there. But I think this is a good opportunity for collaboration, right? If you are a project and you're interested in running a server, but maybe you don't have the right background or the experience, right? Reach out to somebody else in the community who may be interested in running a server but doesn't have a project, right? Maybe you can sponsor that server. I know that XRPL Labs, Wind had an Adopt a Node initiative. I don't know if that's still up and running. Wietze, I think, is on the call. Maybe he can chime in on that. But
It is.
Oh, great. So there's a lot of ways to help support the network and the broader ecosystem, and to try and ensure that we don't, that the network is able to deal with everything that's thrown at it, right? And lastly, I don't think that we should all be rushing to mint everything and like crank those, like we shouldn't crank it to 11 on the moment that XLS 20 is released, right? I think that we all need to realize that we are caretakers and of a complex system, a system that people rely on, a system that moves value, real value for people, and that has implications. So we should all be treating the network, with respect and care, right? And I think that we should all individually think of ourselves as caretakers and to be willing to go to bat for the network and say, hey, I have concerns, and we should, we should all think about this. So that's my thinking. I would certainly suggest that people, not go all out and start minting on day one. And the flip side is I would encourage you, if you have projects and are looking to mint heavily and so forth, go and test out on the DevNet right now. Pummel the DevNet, break it. I mean, nothing could be better than for somebody to figure out how to break the DevNet today, because that allows us, to fix whatever the problem is, or to at least formulate a plan for addressing it, right? That we can apply against the live network, the main net, so that that's more robust and that's more stable. So that's my take there. If anybody else has any questions on XLS 20, again, happy to take that.
Yeah, I hope people follow what you just said, like all the projects that issued IOUs and said, oh, we're going to go for XLS 20. I hope they're all testing on DevNet. I didn't really follow the stuff in the last 2 to 3 weeks, but it would be nice to get an overview if and how many people are currently testing and are really heavily testing. Jörg, do you have any insight on that?
I don't. I know that Mike Check Yourself had like a database running of all the mints. I think Manuel has a number of mints. There's up to 50K or something. But the NFT DevNet was reset a few times. How many projects are involved? It's unclear. It's a 10-minute window, so you can't like see all the history of transactions, and it's kind of weird. But based on participation in this Discord on the NFT channel, 50K sounds like 5 projects making a 10K collection are currently on the DevNet.
Okay.
It might be worth mentioning that in the upcoming Sum 2.3 release, which is 1-2 weeks out, it will be possible for end users to actually interact with the DevNet. So that means that developers can start building things that end users can can use transact like sign requests from devs in XApp's websites. That's currently impossible. It will be again in the next update.
That's really nice too, because that frees us from like having to try and get beta apps for users. It's really cool.
So I hate to rush this along, but I also think there's a couple of other items on the agenda. I think that there's side chains, to talk a little bit about side chains and what Ripple is doing, and then I think that Witsa and I don't know if Richard's on the call as well, intend to talk about hooks. So I think maybe it would be a good idea if we move to either hooks or the side chains, and then if we have time at the end, we can roll back and continue talking about XLS20 questions and so forth.
Yeah, that would be great, because I have one person who wants to ask a question, so let's put that at the end.
Sounds good with me.
So I guess since I was talking about XLS20, I'll pass this on to my colleague Scott Betterman, who's leading Ripple's efforts on developing sidechain support. He's spoken about this before, both at the Apex and then in other instances. And Scott, take it away.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott Detterman. I've been working on the Ledger for about 7.5 years now. Probably the most visible work I've done has been on the payment engine, but I've worked on lots of fun stuff. And today I'm going to be talking about sidechains. So David Schwartz tells a really interesting story about the early days of the XRP Ledger and his motivations for working on that. He had some really good ideas for features that belonged on a distributed ledger, but he knew getting those ideas adopted in a project like Bitcoin was going to be a real challenge. So Bitcoin is rightfully, very conservative about the features it adopts, and even features that are good ideas in isolation don't necessarily fit in with the current set of features on an existing project. So fast forward to today, and I think there are some parallels from where David was way back when and where the XRP ledger is today. There's lots of interesting features on the ledger, and there's lots of interesting features that people bring up to put on the ledger, but not all those features are a good fit for the current ledger, or they may want to be proven out in a different venue before they're actually added to the ledger, so you can convince stakeholders that, yes, this actually is a valuable idea. So if you have an idea for a new ledger feature, there's a couple things you can do, right? You can try to extend an existing project, which we just talked about. So you have to worry about whether the old thing is, the new thing is going to fit in with the old thing. Adding features will restrict the way you're going to be able to extend the ledger in the future. And the way features interact can sometimes be problematic. The other thing you can do is you can start a brand new project, right? We're all developers. We all love greenfield projects. You can elegantly solve the problem that's in front of you. But this has its own set of problems. All the users are on a different project. You're going to have to attract those users to your brand new project. Your new project, while it has the shiny new features, may not have all the tried and true features of the existing project. And in the context of blockchains, you're going to have some sort of native token, and building value for that token is also a real challenge. So enter sidechains. And sidechains are a middle ground between an existing project and a greenfield project. So just like a greenfield project, it's an independent ledger. It can have its own consensus algorithm, its own transaction types and rules. But importantly, there's a way to transfer assets from the XRP ledger to the sidechain, and there's a way to return assets from the sidechain to the XRP ledger. And the way you do that is through cross-chain transactions. And cross-chain transactions really require just two primitives. I need a way to put an asset into trust. And then on the other chain, I need a way to prove that I put that asset into trust. So from a very high level, what's going to happen is you'll put the asset into trust on the main chain. On the side chain, I will prove I put that asset into trust and issue a new asset on the side chain that represents the main chain asset on the side chain. I can then do whatever I do on the side chain, so just muck around with it. And then later on, to return it to the main chain, I either burn it or return it to its issuer, but somehow, get rid of it on the side chain. And then on the main chain, I need to be able to prove that I burned that asset or returned it to its issuer. And then I can release that asset from the trust on the side chain back to its normal uses on the main chain. So there's a couple of ways we can implement these primitives. The first way we implemented was federators. And federators use just regular Ripple accounts in order to put things in trust. We call these accounts door accounts. So the same way you walk through a door to go from one room to another, use these door accounts to move from one chain to a different chain. And then these door accounts are controlled by a set of servers we call federators. And the way the federators control the door accounts is the door accounts disable their master key, and then they use our support for multi-signatures. And the signers list on these door accounts consist of the keys from those federators. So the federators jointly control these door accounts. And then to do a cross-chain transaction this way, you send an asset to the door account. The federators will be listening for assets being put into trust on the door account and communicating amongst themselves. And when a quorum of them agree that yes, that asset was put into trust, they can now issue a transaction on the side chain, issuing an asset that represents that asset on the side chain. I should mention that's one way of implementing those primitives. There are other ways as well, and I'm actually actively exploring some alternate ways of doing this that has a different set of trade-offs by federators. Unfortunately, I can't give a release date for this. I'm going to say soon, though. It's some of the new ideas I'm sort of very excited about are sort of very simple, and I think I can get them done very quickly. But in the meantime, let me just circle back to the beginning. If you have interesting ideas for features that belong on the ledger, but they either don't fit in well with the existing ledger or you think they need to be proved out on a different platform, sidechains are a great way of getting that into production sooner with a token that already has value. And I'll end there and I'll just say, I love talking about this stuff. I really do. So if you want to talk about sidechains, if you want to talk about the XRP ledger, I love to talk about it. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. That was an awesome overview on sidechains, and the door account and some of the stuff that you talk about are like they can view it on GitHub. I will try to get that link and share it. Where your discussion around sidechains has been put forth for everybody to look at.
Yeah, it's a bit sad that sidechains don't get the attention X20D is getting at the moment, because to be honest, and I know that's a unpopular opinion, but I'm more excited about sidechains than NFTs, to be honest.
I think sidechains open up a lot of possibilities and a lot of very interesting applications. And I'll bring this up maybe just as a kind of a connection with XLS20, right? It's entirely possible, like for somebody to put XLS20 on a sidechain, right? So even if XLS20 say takes a long time to activate on the mainnet, right? It will be entirely possible to put it on a sidechain and leverage the sidechain technology. Like obviously, like I'm rushing things a bit, right? Like that's not fully available today, right? But it does also help address some of the questions that people were raising before, like what about performance? Can the network scale to handle it, right? Do NFTs make sense for the XRP ledger as a whole, right? Again, all legitimate questions, and putting it on a sidechain would alleviate some of those concerns, right? It's in a separate thing. It can do its, and the network can grow and account for that use case only, and can focus even more on adding even more functionality for XLS 20, right? And so I think that's a really interesting application for sidechains, and I think the one that Scott touched upon by saying it allows you to innovate faster, and it allows you to do things that may not be a good fit for one network, but are a good fit for a different network. So sidechains definitely are very exciting. I hope that they get more attention too.
Yeah, that's interesting. That sort of represents this in a way, sharding and how things on Ethereum seem to be rolling out with Polygon basically taking over OpenSea, and OpenSea's becoming a shard, and they'll be the domain owner of their marketplace. So it is an interesting balance, I think, with sidechains and how this sort of interoperability will ultimately go across the ledger. So it is cool.
Yeah, as someone who operated a fork of the XRP ledger before, I wish this would have been available like 5 years ago, because then we would have probably done what we did in the past on the sidechain. Not saying I would switch now to a sidechain, but it just opens great opportunities for everyone, especially when you want to change some of the core rules which you can't change on the main network.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you're running the same code, you prove it out, like we were just discussing, and maybe that becomes a mainline, and it's on the mainnet. So, which is very different in my head from sharding. So that is really cool.
I wanted to mention that there is an amendment in voting currently that expands the signer list from 8 to 32, which would make sidechains a lot more secure.
Oh yeah, that's a new amendment that came out with 1.9.1 as well, I believe.
Yes.
Yep, courtesy of Richard Holland. Thank you, Richard.
You're
Good
welcome.
job. Okay, well, do we want to jump to the IOU support for escrow from Richard?
If there's no questions for sidechains, I don't see any requests. But I think we can circle back at the end if we see anything. Or raise your hand if you want to come up. But let's go ahead to the IOU support with Richard.
Right, so that amendment is finished. I've finished programming it, but I haven't written the test cases for it, and so it's still got a ways to go into the pipeline. But the essential gist of it is that you can escrow and pay channel IOU balances, so trust line balances, through a locking mechanism where you effectively keep, if you're the person putting the IOU balance into the instrument, the escrow or the pay channel, you effectively keep that balance on your trust line, and it's locked, and you kind of can't use it. And then eventually, when the instrument settles, then there's a transfer from your trust line to the counterparty's trust line. And the main reason for doing this is that escrows and pay channels are quite useful, but they're not that useful if you have to be exposed to price volatility of XRP all the time. So most people who want to use escrows and payment channels actually want to use it for fiat IOUs, euros or US dollars, for things like paying for electricity or cell service or something like that. That is an amendment that will at some point pop its head up and go into voting, but it's waiting on me to write the final test cases for it, and I've been quite busy on hooks recently.
So just to briefly restate some of all the awesome stuff you're making. Right now, you can only escrow XRP, and this amendment allows escrowing of any token issued on the ledger, and you're primarily interested in using it for pay channels, which is another.
Yeah, so it's both pay channels and escrows, and it allows you to escrow. It allows you to lock up any fungible asset on the ledger.
That's awesome.
I would actually have a thing which I would like to get done, which would be benefit from this a lot. So I might send you a message later, Richard, because that's actually, I was waiting on this for a long time, but then pushed it down on the list because we didn't have time to
Yeah,
put work on this.
not just you. Lots of people are waiting on this, and I programmed it sort of in a hurry, and then I realized, oh gee, there's actually quite a lot to this, and so I spent an extra week writing it, and then I realized I have to write like 100 test cases for it, and then I just couldn't justify leaving hooks for that long because we have people waiting who are building the editor. So I had to go back to building testnet 2. But testnet 2 is essentially done now, so I'll have some time.
One thing to add here is that one of the reasons that this amendment, this new feature became extra useful is that lately we've seen a lot of new tokens being issued on the XRPL, and then the issuer black holes their account, and it becomes fixed supply, and then suddenly it starts to make a lot of sense to be able to use escrow features and other XRPL features on issued assets, because they're no longer an IOU, they're a self-contained asset just like XRP basically. So then you do want to have these features that are supported on XRP on all issued assets.
Yeah, this could help projects to gain a lot of trust once they issue their supply and they're making all these promises of, oh, 20% goes on this, 20% goes on that. They could put their tokens in a time-based escrow, and people can be sure those funds can't be touched. So, yeah, this is awesome.
There's also the crypto conditions on escrows, right? So that opens up the possibility of doing things like atomic swaps across chains.
Yeah, it's really cool. We have some people asking. We're going to have to wait till one more thing, and then we're going to open the floor. Since we're almost at, we're trying to keep it to an hour, but I think everybody is we might go a little, or it's okay if we go over a little bit. But to move it along, I think we should go right to hooks and list of use cases with Wietse.
Yeah. Thank you. I will share a bit of information about hooks, what it is, what they do, what they can do, what we're working on, and then hand over to Richard, who's going to share a bit more about the technical details, as Richard has been basically solely responsible for coding the entire hooks amendment and documentation and everything. We've been discussing some of the specifics and design decisions, but all credits are basically Richard's, and he knows what they do and how they work like no other. And share that in documentation that's already live, by the way. But hooks are basically smart contracts for the XRP ledger, much like EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine on ETH and other chains. Hooks are smart contracts for the XRP ledger, and we decided not to call them smart contracts because there are positive and negative connotations, and people expect certain things with smart contracts, and they really just stating that smart contracts, as we all know them, have been added to the XRPL doesn't do the XRPL much justice, because a lot of things needing smart contracts on other chains are native on the XRPL. So if you want to issue an asset, already possible natively. If you want to do multi-signing, already natively supported on the XRPL. Escrows natively supported. All those things natively supported by the XRPL, and that's a really elegant solution, and it allows for good documentation and protocol standards, etc., etc. So that's great. But what if you want to do more than what the XRPL natively offers? So, I mean, we're in the middle of a situation like that, where there's a call for NFTs on the XRPL, and that then requires people like Nick or other people. I mean, everybody can contribute to the source of the XRP ledger, but it requires someone to code an entire amendment that then gets voted in, or doesn't, or at some point gets voted in to the ledger, and that takes a lot of time, and it's very hard to do. In fact, while maybe you just for your enterprise use case or retail use case, you want to perform a little bit of logic before or after a transaction is executed and committed to the ledger. So we decided that you need to be able to hook onto a transaction and then execute some custom logic. So we call them hooks. But they allow for almost anything you can do with the EVM. So they are smart contracts for the XRP ledger. And we had a couple of objectives here that it shouldn't, if there are smart contracts on layer 1 on the XRPL, it should not slow the ledger down. It should not make the ledger expensive. There should still be forward progress at a enterprise ledger scale. So quite a few challenges. So we didn't port the Ethereum virtual machine to the XRPL or use one of the existing solutions. We decided to go with WebAssembly, a relatively new technique or new standard, and make sure that it stays really fast and really cheap, and that it's really efficient, and it only takes a split second to execute hooks, because they have to be executed by the entire network, because there needs to be consensus about the outcome of the custom code, basically, that was run to influence a transaction. So to give you a couple of examples of what a hook could do, in a payments situation where just one account sends a payment to another account of XRP or any other asset. For consumers, you could think about a savings hook where, for example, every transaction that you send or is sent into your account of a specific asset between a certain amount is split into a transaction that goes to your savings account, a couple of percent auto saving, or a firewall hook where only certain accounts under certain conditions can send into your account or out of your account. So for example, a situation where XRP Forensics or some of the other chain analytics companies provides a list of accounts that has a bad track record. You could, for example, subscribe with a hook in your own account to that list, that external list that also lives on Ledger, and say, hey, if I accidentally at some point fall for a scam unknowingly and I send to one of these addresses, block my transaction before it's committed on the Ledger. Or, for example, a enterprise or retail use case where they know that they have to purchase their products partially in USD and Euro, and then if someone sends a transaction to their account because they sell something, then automatically split the received funds into 75% USD, 25% euros. So they always have the right balances to then pay their own bills without having any risk at currency conversion costs later on. Or think about account access recovery, where access to your account can be recovered if, for example, something happens to you and someone next of kin needs access, but they don't want to have key custody until that happens, and someone else who is authorized confirms that something happened to you. Or think about more complex conditional multi-sign scenarios or in-contract bookkeeping. All very interesting things, and the interesting thing here is that it's not limited to any of these examples, because you can write your own code and run it natively on the ledger to be triggered if a transaction hits your account or is sent out of your account. So the current state of all of this is that there was a testnet 1, and it has actually been used by some developers, and some developers have crashed it on multiple occasions, which is the best thing that can happen, as Nick just mentioned. Please crash it and allow us to find bugs and fix things. So there's now a testnet 2 release and a second testnet 2 release, which is basically feature complete. And we are weeks away from launching a web-based builder, which is an environment that runs in your browser. You don't have to install anything, where you can code hooks, where you can test hooks, where you can compile the hooks to WebAssembly and then deploy them straight to the hooks testnet and test it by sending transactions in or out of your testing accounts straight from your browser. And hooks will have to be coded in the C programming language there, web-based. Now, of course, it's an open network. If you want to run your own node and interact with it locally, you can, all documented. So we're now at the stage where we're almost releasing this publicly, and we'll have to do a lot of testing, hopefully with other devs as well, and at some point invite companies, people to do code reviews. And meanwhile, we'll be looking at providing assembly script access to the Hooks API, so it will be more accessible for JavaScript, TypeScript developers who should then be able at some point to write hooks in a more familiar programming language, because C is pretty low level. And we'll provide more samples over time as well. And then where should this go in the near future from the perspective of XRPL Labs? Because we've been working on this a lot. Richard has spent countless hours, weeks, months on building this, documenting this. At some point, we are going to make it very easy for end users to interact with audited and trusted hooks in a hook store-like environment from within Sun and a web interface. And work with developers to audit their contracts, do some kind of contract consulting maybe for companies, enterprises, and work with everybody to allow more use cases and fine-grained transaction rules on an account level on the XRPL. So this is me handing it over to you, Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Pizza. So there are a couple of differences between hooks and what most people would be familiar with when they think of smart contracts in blockchain space. And one of the main differences is that a hook is installed on an account that you still control. So on the Ethereum virtual machine, if you upload a contract, it's its own account, and the code sort of owns that account. And if you want an account on the Ethereum virtual machine, you can have that too, and that's controlled by keys, but you can't sort of have this hybrid. So what we set out to build was something that, as Peter said, is sort of supplements the existing smart contract-like behavior on the XRP ledger. So hooks you can think of them as being orthogonal to the transactors. So you can actually decide which types of transactions you'd like your hook to trigger on. So in the first version of the hooks codebase in testnet 1, every time that you wanted to have a hook, you could only have one, and you had to upload it to your account, and that was quite expensive. But in testnet 2, we have hook chaining and reference counting. So what that means is that if you're just a user, an end user, and you want to use a hook that's a well-known hook, you can install that on your account for about the same cost as a trust line, and you can install up to 4 of them. And it will, you don't have to pay to upload the contract again to the ledger because it's already on the ledger. You simply basically have a pointer to the existing contract. And the fees that are paid by whoever is sending a transaction into your account, or you if you're sending a transaction out of your account. The fees are based on the maximum or the worst case execution time of the hook, but typically the fees are still quite low, sort of in the range of maybe 10,000 to 1,000 drops, depending on what exactly your hooks do. It is possible to have accounts that are completely controlled by hooks. You just you install a hook on the account and then you black hole the account. That's how that's done. The main other differences between sort of Ethereum smart contracts and hooks is that hooks are asynchronous because the XRP ledger is asynchronous. You can't have a hook call another hook in the same ledger, but what you can do is have a hook emit a transaction, and that transaction can trigger another hook in the next ledger, and so on and so forth. And you can have a chain of these, and it can go for up to 10 steps before it's killed. I'm trying to think of any other interesting aspects that might interest users. They're parameterized now, so you can, when you install a hook, you can set named parameters at install time, which will change the behavior of the hook. So, for example, in Vitsa's example of a savings hook, you obviously wouldn't want to send your percentage savings to somebody else's savings account. So when you parameterize your hook, when you install it, you would set your savings account as one of the parameters, and then the hook code, when it executes, would send it to your account.
One of the questions that just came up in the chat, can hooks only work with transactions, or could you place a hook on an NFT itself?
Hooks are only triggered by transactions, but I'm not sure I understand the question, because everything on the XRP ledger is event-based. So
Yeah.
if you just put the hook to trigger, we have this concept of transactional stakeholders. So on the XRP ledger, it's not always obvious whose hooks should be executed. So for example, in an NFT situation, there's an issuer and an owner often, and then maybe there's also a buyer and a seller and a destination and a second destination. There can be a lot of different accounts involved, and they're all what we call transactional stakeholders. And if you're what's called a strong transactional stakeholder, then you have the right to roll back the transaction, so it will never happen if you choose to roll back. And if you're a weak transactional stakeholder, you can pay yourself to have your hook executed, but all you can do is update your own state of your hook for your own accounting purposes, essentially. So to answer the question, you would, if you were the issuer, you could certainly set up a hook and have it executed when people move your NFT around. And in some cases, you could actually block the movement of that NFT because you would be a strong transactional stakeholder for some transactions. So I think sending it, or I think creating an offer, you can block it, but you can't block canceling an offer, and you can't block burning. We have a matrix of the different the things you can do for different types of transactions.
One other thing would be like fees associated on a transfer, the transfer fee or broker fees. And I would assume, like you're saying, the stakeholders in the transaction would get the event.
Yeah, so I mean, that's already enforced by the transactor itself, the transfer fee. But yeah, if you're a weak transactional stakeholder, so if you are not closely connected to the transaction enough to have the right to stop the transaction, then you can still have your hook executed, but you have to pay for that execution. The person who made the transaction isn't paying for that hook execution. And you have to have configured your account to allow this, so it's effectively a collect call, and then your hook can sort of update its own state. So basically, you can have effectively a table of things that happened inside your hook universe, and you say, well, this was transferred at this time for this much, and it allows you to sort of do a little bit of on-ledger accounting, maybe for your own taxes or whatever.
Yeah, when you said it's like enforced by the transactor, the actual fee arriving, people have been pontificating, oh, we can split it out into a community treasury.
Oh, yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's really cool stuff, especially when you think of like, we saw a demo, I think, with Netcat and Hammertoe, sort of doing the old style NFTs, but the idea would be like a gumball machine you send the money to and you get an NFT back. That's like a simple example of a hook with NFTs that comes to mind.
Yeah, so you could actually have a Blackhold account with a hook on it that actually mints NFTs, and then under certain circumstances, really whatever you want. It could be a lottery even. It spits out, mints you an NFT and sends it back to you as an emitted transaction.
Very cool.
I was gonna say, with the side chains, there is actually a way to avoid having federators if you have hooks on both chains. So if you have hooks on the main chain and hooks on the side chain, you can use the hook as the place that locks up the asset. So that's your trust account, effectively. And then you could have an oracle send a proof of validation across to the other chain, send it as a one-drop payment into the hook on the other chain, and then that hook could verify that proof of validation and then spit out the asset on the other side.
Very cool. Trustless with hooks and sidechains.
Yeah, the whole combination of all these things will be really amazing. So can't wait to see all of it in action.
The web editor sounds amazing, by the way. Sounds really cool and fun.
It definitely is. So the testnet 2 actually has the NFTs enabled as well, and expanded signer list, and hopefully IU escrows. I haven't put that on there yet, but when we launch, we're hoping to have the most feature complete testnet ever.
We're almost at time. Oh, I mean, we're past time, a little 2 minutes over. That we wanted to make this, but I think, let's be a little flexible. I'm gonna try and buttress. If we're done with hooks discussion, let's talk about maybe the ambassador program and what we're doing here, Daniel and I. So basically, why we're up here and you can be in the future is that I was myself nominated by trusted developers in the community who basically see, what we're doing, what we're about, and trying to cultivate the network here. And I myself am sort of just imitating who I saw as role models in the space, and I'll be right up front about it. It's like Weetza, Nick, and even Daniel to some respect, not technical, but all the other stuff around but Daniel will jump in and answer questions, Ripple attends in the audience. But some of these people are very helpful in the community, and they've been raising issues about how we're kind of confused about these new features and how we want to make it better. And we kind of already trying to do this on our own. Let's try to maybe combine our efforts, get people to help each other, because I'm just a single person building an art gallery on the internet, and I can't answer questions all day, but I love to do it, and I'll keep doing it because I do think it does. I mean, just look at Weetza, who's answered many, many questions. I think probably never knew that, I was learning basically through that. And so I do think it matters. And that took years, but I guess it's just exciting to be sort of part of this concept that's coming together with the Ledger Foundation, so the XRP-LF and Ripple, which is I guess they see value in independent developers and want to bring them, involve them in the conversation. I know the developers on stage from Ripple, developers on stage from XRPL Labs, have been, been here a while, and they kind of do want to see new people come in and sort of cultivate, because maybe it's they are building cool stuff and people will be excited about this. But we represent different scopes of the community. I myself am more focused on obviously on NFTs. I'm really excited about that standard. Daniel's running his own business with Casino. Well, I mean with other people, but Casino Coin. You're the CTO of Casino Coin. You've been around a while on XRPL Talk. You have trust to the community. And I think one of the tenets that we're trying to do here is, so I guess if you've been in, I kind of want to relate it to Spaces, but it's no shilling. We're not talking about the price. We're only interested in building cool shit and helping each other. I think this Discord has been set up so that we can all talk to each other and sort of it's got a mix of people and command, and we're all trying to make it better. So the ambassador program is a thing we're going to try to do with this community call. I guess we're also going to be doing what we always do online. I can tell you that basically, I'd be doing this anyway, essentially. So I'm glad I get to have some authority and sort of have some voice here. But I also want to raise other people up, because I don't have all the time to do this, and I know Daniel doesn't either, and other people in the program. You can just look at the sidebar and look at the XRPL ambassador tag or role, and you'll see who's in there right now. But it's different. So we have Manuel, who's building an index / portfolio trader / everything. He's building a whole tool set for the XRPL. It's pretty amazing stuff. We have Calvin, who originally has been a discussion on NFTs. Who proffered XLS 19. We have Flying Fox, who you might know from XRPL Tipbot, the new one, or tipbot.tips. Also built on the Dex.live. So these are independent developers. They're not sponsored by, they got some grants. That's a new thing. We can talk about the problems and intricacies of that. But it's a developer grant. They're giving us money to sponsor developers to build stuff. And some of those people did get grants. Some of them, I got a grant. Ripple Flying Fox got a grant. But that had nothing to do with this ambassador program. I think just trying to bring it together there. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, the nominations are not based on if you got a grant or not. It's more based around the fact people that have knowledge in certain areas are connected to a certain degree and are always helpful when it comes to questions. It's a bit of what I'm doing quite often is if I have a certain problem, I think about who could I ask to get some feedback or some help with. And I have my group of usual people I ping and be like, hey, I got this problem. Do you have time for a call? Can we jump on a Zoom real quick and have a conversation about that? And that's probably the idea of the ambassador program. So we want to have a group of people you can reach out to and be like, which just happened the other day. Someone has a business idea, has some sort of white paper. They're lacking a developer for whatever reason. And then they're like, hey, can you connect us with the right people? So the idea is encourage people to build and encourage people to ask questions, because there are no silly questions. If you have a problem, you can reach out to someone and you will get help from someone, whatever that might be. It could be like connecting you with someone else, or the conversation I just saw in the channel for this call where people be like, oh yeah, how do I set up a validator? Does this make sense? Blah, blah, blah. There are tons of people you could have a call with or send an email or a Discord message. The idea is connect everyone a little bit better, because I think while the developer community on the Exabill is pretty great, it's not at the same level as, let's say, the Ethereum community is at the moment, from my point of view. And I know some people might see that different, but we're still growing. So the better we're organized and the easier the access to this community and the pool of knowledge is, the better for everyone. And that's the idea behind the ambassador program.
I agree. That sounds very eloquently put. And the way you can become an ambassador is we're interested in finding people who want a greater involvement in scope of responsibility, writing blog posts, demos, podcasts, giving talks at conferences. Apex, I just saw, is coming out in September. And then I think there's stuff we can share later on if you are interested. This is going to become a thing on the website somewhere, but everybody's really busy. So, but this community call is very well timed, and I think needed to be done. So, no upset there.
I think next time we might change the agenda a bit and just focus on like maybe one or two topics only.
Yeah.
So we're not running out of time, and we now said everything has been said, quote unquote.